stand upon a land of an ancient wisdom, creator, spirit, beautiful, strong. Yes, it giveth life for these sacred lands, eternal systems delivered through the sun. To the depths it glisten, stars in the night, crystallized life. Ancestors' prayers in my ears so sublime. Blood in the soil, never forget or deny. That anguish, the cries, the ongoing genocide, the devastation, theft and wiping out of tribes. Remorseless attacks, heinous crimes, poison in the waters. But the people we survived, inscribed with lies and decimated with deceitful bribes. But the people we survived, pay respect and give love and thanks one time. One time, one time. Peace, love and unity to all my originals rise. The ancestors in the land amidst every child, woman and man, no matter where you stand. The ancestors in the land, so I pay respects. The ancestors in the land amidst every child, woman and man, no matter where you stand. The ancestors in the land, so I pay respect. Seems the world lost its mind like a sleep deprived. People not peeping signs of the symbols divine. Carvings in stone, sacred paths, ancient truths, and the workings of the grounds, the creeks.
Go now till you fear nothing. Can't stop till they take something. Go on day by day walking. Feel like I was born just to be nothing. Different world, different scene, different day coming. Never do what you say till I stay walking. Stepping the vibe right, steadily getting my mind right. Shifting with side eyes, never let you into my life. Don't mind me, I'ma keep walking. Baby, goddamn, baby, goddamn, baby, goddamn, Indian blues. Baby, goddamn, Indian road blues. Baby, goddamn, baby, goddamn, baby, goddamn, Indian blues. Baby, goddamn, Indian road blues.
What you cooking?
I'm in the sky, yeah, I'm floating through the skies now. I'm doing fine, 'cause I could get you off my mind now. Yeah. You don't know what I'm up to now and you hate it. Yeah, I live my life for me now and you hate it. Now I love the night time. Now I don't wait for right time. Now I found peace in my mind. Now you'll be lost for lifetime. Yeah, running from problems, can't escape now. I've been running since college. It's switching like autumn leaves falling, but I don't do the drama. I just cut all them, stick to the stages and stacking the dollars. With shorty who look like a model, sit on a rooftop playing Nirvana. Why? Baby, why do we do this shit all the time? Baby, why do we do this shit all the time? Yeah.
Nangana mulana, nangana mulana, yenbana, nangana mulana, waka, nangana mulana, yuringa, yuri, nangana mulana, yakapna, yakapna niranoma, nangana mulana, baya, baya dungulaja, gara. I give acknowledgement to this great sacred land that I stand upon, on sacred Clitterban clan area of Yorta country in so-called Australia. Our people have been practicing sacred law in this land for many thousands and thousands of years, and we continue to practice our sacred law in these lands in every way that our ancestors did to the now, focused in the now, bringing the dreaming into the now in all ways that we can as sovereign people who have never once ceded our sovereignty, but always continued to stand for it, stand with it, and bring our Yenvana with us into the now. And one of the ways that we bring our Yenvana from the past into us as the Yenvana, the people in the now, is through Baya. Baya is song. Baya is central to our essence as a people, for us as Indigenous people from this land, and also as Indigenous peoples globally. My name is Neil. I come from the Yorta people. My artist name is Dreaming Now. And it's an honor to be here today to share this very important discussion around music for us as Indigenous people. It is something that is intrinsic to all of our cultures. It is essential to our identities and essential to the way that we stand up against all things that attempt to remove our essence, our presence in contemporary society. But we do that with power, we do that with magic, and we'll continue to do that. Today, we are here on multiple platforms via Facebook, through Indigenous Peoples Movement, Lakota People's Law Project, and also the Last Real Indians Facebook pages. And I'm here today as a coalition member of the Indigenous Peoples Movement to share in this discussion with my co-host, Liam, who I will pass it over to now to share a few words with you also.
Sayego, everybody. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on what Neil's been talking about, and really just opening up this conversation for everybody around the world as Indigenous musicians to communicate with each other, and to really try to use IPM as an international platform for us as artists to work with each other, but also to kind of design infrastructure and really what each of us need, in our respective communities and how we can work together. This has kind of come out of a lot of discussions between me and Neil. And so I really just want to open up the floor to everybody one at a time. If everyone could introduce themselves, if we could start with you, Natani, and just maybe a little bit on who you are, where you come from, and how you got your start in music.
Yeah, Hamataki Api, Chante, Washte na Pechu, Zapalo, Kian Luzahan, Machapalo, not Aninez and Machapalo. Hello, everyone. What I said is just a greeting in Lakota. I'm Oglala Lakota, enrolled in the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, but I'm also Navajo, Dene. I grew up on the Navajo Indian Reservation, a place called Chinle, Arizona. First 18 years of my life. And I'm also Omaha, from Macy, Nebraska. My grandpa came from Macy, Nebraska, over to Arizona and married a Navajo. So this is kind of my backstory, where I come from, who I come from, my people. My mother, her name is Gloria Grant. She's a longtime educator for the Chinle, Arizona school district. My father's name is Russell Means, and he was a longtime activist and artist, actor, you name it, man. He did it for the American Indian movement. But me, I'm an artist. I write music. I have been for a long time. More than a decade now for sure. You know, and been releasing music now for a decade. Um, this is what I do. I originally went to an art school when I was younger for filmmaking. That turned into making music, and I've been doing it ever since, traveling the world, um, all over, Turtle Island, Europe, hoping to go overseas to Australia, New Zealand soon, and share our relations there as well. But it's good to be here with IPM, Last Row Indians, and everybody on the panel today. So, how you too?
Thank you so much for that. Phoenix, do you want to introduce yourself and where you come from and kind of how you got your start in music?
Hello, everyone. Biali no toka Phoenix, Newa, Chicago. I am I'm here on the lands of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, as well as the Miami, Ho-Chunk, and many other tribes that have safeguarded these lands. Thank you so much for being here. I am Lipanapachi Guachichila Chichimeca, and I am just here to really be present and like just put my music out here. I started music when I was really young. I was like around like 11 or 10 years old. Even going back as far as 7 years old, like starting to play guitar. But I started singing at like 10 years old. Started like producing and DJing and all of that, like around the age of like 10, 11. And from there, I just been expressing my soul and, using the gifts that Creator has bestowed upon me, which I'm truly grateful for. Here to, share my story and relate to those who also share my story and express my resilience through music and creative medicine. So, yeah, and that's a little bit about me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to connecting with everybody on a deeper level through this music medicine and just through our creation. And I'm really grateful for you all being here as well. Hello, everybody. Whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or just Twitch, thank you for being here and letting us hold space. And yeah, I'm grateful.
Thank you so much. Antoine, do you want to introduce yourself and where you come from and how you got your start in music?
Camera and my mic is off.
Okay, can you hear us?
You showed up for a little bit.
He's good.
Am I good?
Yeah, you're good. We can hear you.
All right. What's up, everybody? My name is Antoine. I come from the Umaha people. I'm Umaha, I'm Lakota, I'm Oglala, and Sichangu. Yeah, I grew up traditionally, following our traditional ways. I, sing these songs. I've always followed this path. And on this path, my mom taught me it's called the Red Road. We walk a certain way as Native people. And, just growing up, I've always fallen in love with the music, singing. And as a singer, I was taught that our voice belongs to the people. When you're called upon, you give your voice to the people. So I walked in that way as a singer. And then when I was about 18, 19, I tapped into music, into rapping. And since then, I've been making music. And it was always my goal to incorporate our traditional singing within my music. So if you listen to my songs, a lot of times I incorporate that. And, the game is always searching for something new and unique. And what's unique about Indigenous artists is just that. We're Indigenous artists. We have a lot that comes with us, a lot of stories, a lot of medicine, a lot of styles that you can't copy, you can't, create, you can't mimic. It's us, and us being ourselves is unique. So that's the goal, is to bring, indigenous sounds and people to the light. And I always said, you know, when you bring me personally to the light and give me access, I say I want access. People ask all the time, what do you need? I say access. And when I get access, and I know it's for everybody too, because we're like-minded, it brings everybody up. It opens up the door for native businesses, brands, artists, everything. There's a lot of things that people need to see and need to be supporting, and they would on their own if they had, you know, had it in front of them. So uplifting indigenous artists brings access to our people and brings a good, you know, I gotta say, I'll get to it. But yeah, my name's Antoine. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm an artist. So I'm excited to connect with everybody and excited to be here. Much love.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that touches on a lot of things that we're going to bring up tonight. Cool. I want to open up the floor for you, Fawn, to talk about where you come from and how you got your start in music.
Tanse, kitatamskat na wow, Fawn mo disigaso yan. Oni chicks ko po nagkutse, ni me waite nagitute yan uta amongst all you nagamuak. Hello, everybody. My name is Fawn Wood. I come to you from the Saddle Lake Cree Nation up here in Treaty 6 territory of Canada. I'm also Coast Salish, Statlium, and Stalo. How I got my start in music, I've been recording music now as a solo artist for a little more than 15 years. I was brought up in a very traditional atmosphere when it came to music. I was brought up around a lot of our ceremonies and gatherings, and being exposed to music like that from such a young age was something that stuck with me. And I never really kind of dabbled in the thought of creating and sharing my own music until I got a little older, until I seen that a lot of the music that our young people in our communities were exposed to, there wasn't too many stories or songs or anything being told from a female perspective. And that's kind of one of the driving forces on why I create music. I'm also a big advocate for encouraging people to learn and speak their languages, and also utilizing that in the expression that is music. I'm really happy to be here today. Namotagaitan is how we say it in Cree, and I'm excited to hear other perspectives from other artists and share what I can from my perspective. Hi, Naskaman.
Thank you so much for that. Xiutezcatl, can we open up the floor to you and can maybe tell us where you come from and how you got your start in music?
Kama piali no chime ni mechlah paloa na natoka Xiutezcatl no natiu no masewalpowayan ewa akalpishka altepetl. My name is Xiutezcatl. I am artist, a storyteller. My family on my pop side is from a community called Acalpishka in Xochimilco, Mexico. My people are Xochimilca. And yeah, grateful to be sharing space with everybody and tapping in. My mom is mixed European, so mixed kid growing up, you know, on Nooch, Arapaho, Cheyenne territory in Colorado, calling in from Tongva land, Gabrielino Shoshone land, here in Los Angeles. And yeah, I got started making music, just playing the keys at first. When I was like 6 or 7, my family got a banged up old piano from Salvation Army, and I started playing the keys. And from there, feeling, you know, tapped in and called to write my own songs. I grew up similarly to how a lot of other folks are sharing, you know, with music as a very, you know, important part of my connection to my community and to my family. You know, my ancestral homelands and my connection to my community, you know, happened across this colonial border. And so oftentimes that distance, you know, was really closed by our ability to tap into our songs and our ceremonies and you know, these different traditions that held us close as a community and as a family. And from there, you know, just learning and starting to honestly get into hip hop and hearing Talib Kweli's Ballad of the Black Gold and hearing, you know, KRS-One and these different, you know, MCs that were speaking about revolution and about their communities and representing their culture in such a powerful way. Inspired, it lit that fire within me to explore and start to do the same thing. And from, you know, in our own way, from my own perspective, But I fell in love with writing music, performing, getting on stage with my little brother when we were kids, and from there, kind of continuing to push the envelope and having a lot of incredible opportunities to share the music and have it take me all over the world. So it's been a blessing, and now as I'm continuing to dive into that journey of relearning and reclaiming my language and seeing how that is an incredible part of telling that story and uplifting so many other talented young Indigenous artists. Like I've the privilege of being surrounded by so many incredible people. So I'm very hopeful and excited about just this generation of young artists and how we will also continue to in the way that revolutionary artists throughout history have. Whether that's Bob Marley or Tupac Shakur, different people in different genres and in different artistic expressions. But it's an important time for Indigenous artists to be tapping into their voices, supporting one another, and yeah, lifting each other up. So grateful to be here with y'all.
Thank you so much. I got to introduce myself now. Xiutezcatl Liam, Kanyake Haga. Hello, my name is Liam. I'm Mohawk on my dad's side. My mom's also European, like Xiutezcatl. I actually grew up in Minneapolis, which is where the American Indian movement started. So there's definitely some of that had a influence on me growing up, as far as the urban music scene there too. Not strictly just within the Native community, but I was really blessed to have a dad that was a visual artist and a sculptor. And so I got to go to art school from when I was in 4th grade all the way through high school. So I was able to study music. And then I went to music college as well. And that's kind of how I ended up in Chicago. But I've lived in the city most of my life, so I have a similar story to some people as far as reconnecting with language. And music has always been something my whole life that just came naturally. So I think as I got older and really started to move around the country and work with different Indigenous artists and activists around the country, I realized how similar so many of our stories are, and how different too. But I guess that's some of the basis that me and Neil have talked about with this session, is kind of opening up our own individual experiences and what brings us together, and how we can kind of on an international level start creating kind of an atmosphere that really nurtures Indigenous music in all sorts of communities on every part of the earth. So I want to start kind of on that tip of asking people, like, do you believe there's enough resources in your respective community to support Indigenous music? And I'd like to start with Natani, if you could. Do you think in your community there is? Or?
It's funny because I've started releasing music, I think in 2011. But I started recording in 2009 when I was first in college, and I've seen kind of this upcoming in social media and how it's utilized, not only like on a mainstream level, but within our own community, and how we can use it to reach further in different places. And right now, with TikTok and with even the Web3 movement that's happening, furthering our reach is at an all-time like high right now. Like we can do it. And we're also in a weird place just as Indigenous people where, we kind of came off these huge movements of like Standing Rock and the Line 3, and they're still fighting pipelines up in northern Canada, and it's just this era of creativity that is just moving, man. And you can see it within so many young artists, not only us, not only people on this panel, but the younger people, like the 18-year-olds, the 16-year-olds. They're just taking it to another level of amazing, really. And just like artists before us, I know Xiutezcatl mentioned this earlier. It's our job to always keep bringing our people with us, and Tone said it earlier too, like, just get us into these places, just get to these places where we can just lend a helping hand back as well, and just kind of relay people forward, and keep our people moving, keep this movement growing. So I definitely see it in our communities, and our community is growing, and it's becoming more unified because of what's happening, just like what's happening now with the IPM movement, with what we're doing right now with this panel. I mean, we have artists from Australia, you know, in Chicago, LA, you know, people back home or in Canada, you know, so we're unifying right now and furthering our reach in this moment. So I'm hyped for it. I'm excited. I love where we're going as a people in the music scene for sure.
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel that affects you in Canada's First Nations people, Fawn?
I definitely agree with you know, you do see a surge, especially up here, and being a traditional artist, you see a surge in young people utilizing music to express themselves and to tell their stories. I grew up on my reserve, which is Saddle Lake, and I think definitely lately you see a lot more resources popping up for kids, and when it comes to creativity. I know growing up there wasn't much to offer where when it came to kind of nurturing that creative aspect of our youth. But because of things like social media, you know, we're able to connect, and you're able to network and be inspired by watching, even by some of the artists, or probably all the artists that you have on this panel. And I think that too, I think it's encouraged music in our communities more because of social media. And I really think that it's really kind of been that push behind not even just the Canadian youth in our communities, but youth from all over, whether they live on a reserve or in an urban setting. Just being able to see others do and come from where we come from, do things, is inspiring.
Yeah, definitely. And Phoenix, how do you feel like resources are available being in an urban setting, being in Chicago?
It's honestly, there's so much here, and it's great. And I really am appreciative of like how just even in our own Black and Brown community here, we're very supportive of each other as artists, of, you know, of Indigenous artists and Black artists. And we're, you know, there's always work to be done. And I feel like since we have all these resources, I feel like extending that is something that is very important. And I feel like, honestly, I feel like queer, two-spirit, and women, Black and Brown people in our city, like, I feel like we work so hard in our own communities to like create a platform for ourselves and each other. And I feel like it's not like there's a lot of work on our end, but on the outside, it's like, you know, we're constantly fighting that. You know, we're constantly trying to take space, and you know, um, it's something that like has been on my mind for a long time as a creative. Um and it's just important that we give these resources, like whatever we have, like we just got to extend that. And that's like also another reason why it's good to, you know, spread that message through our music too, like, you know. And I just feel like, yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm really proud of how far we've come, and like the usage of all the platforms that we have at our fingertips. And yeah, that's my take.
Thank you.
I was just gonna jump in and
Anton,
oh, my
sorry,
bad.
what was
Go
that?
ahead. Go ahead. Oh no, I was
No,
just gonna
you can go. You
add
can go.
to
You can
that.
go.
I think what everyone's saying, I think is on point. I think there's a greater visibility than there has ever been for Indigenous artists. As you know, Natani was saying, TikTok, social media, these different platforms give us the opportunity for visibility in a way that there hasn't been before. And even just seeing ourselves as Indigenous people, you know, through these different mediums, whether it's seeing artists, you know, shine and be kind of involved in their own scene, or you know, reservation dogs, I think is something culturally that it has had an impact on people across many different communities and tribal communities. Um, and at the same time, I think infrastructure is very lacking still. Like the more that I understand the music industry and spend time in LA, and you know, it's inherently very extractive. and like indigenous people were familiar with that extractive capitalism that is at the core of a lot of people's relationships with indigenous communities, and the music industry is like that too. And so I think that I'm really excited to see over the next couple of years not just an increase of visibility or like someone can go viral or pop off or blow up individually, but like what is the actual infrastructure that exists for artists to be able to have means of distributing our own music, or like who are gonna be the people that step up to create the labels, or like become the Odd Futures, or the these collectives of artists, or the ASAP Mob, or I always reference hip hop, but there's a lot of different ways to think about it, and I think there's a lot of room for growth, and I think conversations like this are like the starting point of a lot of that. And I think the internationalism is really important, of seeing ourselves in context to indigenous artists in all over the world. I think that's so important to kind of weave that connectivity and understand that infrastructure I think is still lacking in a lot of ways, because community has got us. Like community shows up, community is there at the events, people gather, people always show love. Like there's never a question about that. That's always been beautiful, and I think we thrive within that. And it's more so like from an industry standpoint, or from a how do we actually financially support ourselves as artists, so that we can be abundant and we can elevate everybody else in our community or in our band, or who are also giving to these things. And so creating greater abundance through like the infrastructure is something that I'm excited to see continue to grow within the indigenous art space over the next couple of years. And I think conversations like this are such a good starting point.
Yeah, and I really like how you use the word infrastructure. That's been like kind of a key point me and Neil have kind of been talking about, and trying to create these platforms, and also to open up IPM for just a lot of the younger generation that does need management, that does need, like you said, teams, labels. And I think I personally relate to that at a certain point in the career development. It was kind of like you look around the room and you're like, where's, a lot of communities have infrastructure built up in the music industry for each other, and have these programs and companies essentially, built up for their own community. And I think we really need to have that for all indigenous camps. And so I think that's a really interesting topic that you bring up. And I think a lot of people are really talking about that right now. And I want to kind of turn that over to Antoine. And at your point in your career, where you've kind of had some crossover, where you have the traditional music, but you're also popping off contemporary wise, do you feel like there's enough resources to really support indigenous musicians in that way, or what's your kind of opinion on that?
Yeah, so it's as far as resources, growing up, I lived on the res, lived in the city, lived in small towns. I was all over. Found home in Omaha, which is it's in Nebraska. When you say Nebraska, people think cornfields, which they're cornfields, but Omaha is like a separate place. It's a big city. We have a really big music scene here. So for me personally, I had resources. I just had to learn how to reach out to studios. I had to learn that on my own. But as far as resources for indigenous artists, I was blessed to have went viral with a round dance video that hit 100 million views that set my career off. So it kind of pushed me into the light. Whether I had this limelight or not, I was going to be singing our traditional songs and following this way regardless. It's a way of life. It's not for clout. It's not for anything. Any of these things, it's just a way of life. It's for the love of music. And that's how we live as traditional people, as Native people. And when I tapped into the music, I started getting a taste of the industry. I started getting around different people in different settings, where I learned, okay, it's hard to walk these two worlds as a Native person, because we're raised with these teachings, and then society isn't raised with these teachings, and it clashes. So you have to try to find this balance within it. And Tani always talks about balance, and every time we speak on things, it's a balance of things. So it's hard just to step out here as an indigenous artist, especially if you're coming from the res. Coming from the res, you get intimidated leaving to go into a big city, not seeing people you grew up with, not seeing people that look like you. It's hard. to come from the res to do that. And I see that with all the kids that we work with. So as far as resources, I'm gonna get to that. I started this, what started off as a brand, I found it All Season. It was just clothing. And through All Season, I looked and I saw young artists that were killing it. And I was like, okay, when I first started making music, I didn't get love. And that's just the reality of it. There were some old head native artists that just didn't show me love at all. So I said, okay, I'm not gonna be that. I'm the young guy right now. When I become the old head or the OG, I'm gonna show love. So as I got this platform and my fan base grew, I said, you know what, through All Season, I'm gonna give access to young artists. All the access that I have, I'm gonna give to them. So through All Season, we travel to communities, native communities, and specifically the rural communities that don't have access or don't have any of these things. You know what I mean? So we come out there, we bring a full studio, we bring a videographer, and we teach them how to make music. We teach them how to record. We shoot a music video with them, and we give them the song and music video afterwards. And then after that, we show them how they could do it from home. And right now we're working on Equipped, where we're gonna send out 10 full recording studios to young artists around the country through All Season. So that's the small scale. The big scale is we're working towards bringing studios to different reservations. Through All Season, we have 10 artists. Myself, Gunnar Jules, 2 for 1, Destroyed Casman, Spur Puyer, Miracle Spotted Bear. We have Tidro, SR, and yeah, that's it. So our collective goal is to uplift Native artists and bring access to the people. But we don't have resources on the res, man. Like, you have to leave the res, and a lot of times it's hard to leave the res for young artists. So what we want to do is bring access to the res. You know what I mean? We don't have that. You know, we should have access to all of these things to create and be able to thrive. You know, they put us in these conditions to where it's like, okay, we have to choose: be around family, be around our people, or be around a place where nobody loves us, nobody cares for us, because we're surrounded by love in the res. No matter how much poverty there is, no matter how little we have, there's love. Our people show love to each other, uplift each other, and it just feels good to be a part of a community. And that's what a lot of times the city lacks for natives. Even in Omaha, which is why I'm trying to bring that here. But as far as the resources, again, with All Season, we just want to create an economy within the creative realm for Native artists, for Indigenous artists. And, you know, it's cool hearing everyone's perspectives, man, because it's, you know, we talk about this all day. We'll be sitting there eating, and boom, we get into a business meeting. You know what I mean? It's always on our minds as Native artists. So for me, for myself, I'm always kicking down doors to forcefully take these resources that we deserve. We have to fight and claw to sit at these tables, and fight and claw to sit in these spaces on our own land. You know, where we were shoved out, we were pushed out and put in these places and said, hey, stay there. And now we have to fight and claw our way back out. And that's what we're doing. So as far as resources, man, like, it's all about bringing it to the young Native artists. As we get it, we give it. So, and that's the collective message that I'm getting from all the artists right now. And, you know, much love to everybody. First time really connecting with some of you, and it's good to hear. And, you know, I'm glad to be here and share my perspective from the Midwest.
Thanks, man. I think that's really badass what you're doing. And it actually reminded me of some things Neil was talking about. They're doing similar kind of approach to Indigenous music in so-called Australia. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Neil?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also really resonate with absolutely everything that you just said there, Brother Antoine. And this whole conversation has been really amazing in terms of the diversity, even within similar areas. But effectively, I would say over here, I think Xiutezcatl mentioned something that was really powerful to me in terms of my experience with, you know, to acknowledge that the music sector, I often think about it in terms of as Indigenous people, we had song for thousands of years. Song as intrinsic and not separate from our cultural ways. And then in so-called contemporary times, there was something developed which was called a music industry, which when you think about song and you think about music industry, there's this automatic sense of there's a tension there. And part of that tension for me, most 100% does come back to this theme and this issue around extractivism, and not only for Indigenous people, but as a whole, and that there's business constructs that have been developed to support and push the music out there, but by default, it it plays into these extractive things that are very outcome based and outcome driven, and that does flow over into what is desired and what is expected and demanded of Indigenous people, and what that then means in how we internalize that as well. You know, is it then that we suddenly feel within ourselves that our music has to be on a stage in front of thousands of people at a festival to mean that it's been successful, or does it need to be in the biggest theatre spaces and so on and so forth? And um, I'm not saying that that's all bad, but just coming back to that sense of balance in terms of where does that access lay, and what does that mean in terms of our song, and how does our song grow, and how does our song continue in a way that's in a holistic construct that acknowledges everything that we descend from as Indigenous people. And does that then mean that first and foremost you need to be able to have access to do every single thing within your song and music, first and foremost within, whether that's your own traditional land, so to speak, where your own community might be from, or whether that's, you know, you might have grown up on what we would say off country on another people's Indigenous lands. Should you have a right to be able to be a part of that community that you've grown up in and create community, and in the right way participate in music there first and foremost? And that does come back to, well, where is the infrastructure? So out here, yes, there's a love growing for Indigenous music, and it's happening rapidly, and Indigenous artists are popping off all over the place in terms of mainstream representation. And you know, it comes back to some of the things that I think Antoine touched on it, hit the nail on the head earlier, in terms of there's something about Indigenous song and story that it's so unique, because what it is and what it descends from, it comes from the land, it is part of the land, and we are part of that as we continue today. So one of the things a number of people are looking to do out here at the moment, various different Indigenous people across the country, is asking those questions about, well, how do we make sure that what we're doing is about building our base and our holistic structures as a people, so that there isn't this tendency then to continue to fall into this outward presentation of indigeneity that's not necessarily nourishing our roots. And if our roots become undernourished, then how can what we're doing continue? And this certainly aligns with movements out here in terms of where we're at in terms of, broadly speaking, Indigenous rights across the board, across every sector of our lives that are lived out here, from land management to contemporary Indigenous education, participation in sports, every single aspect of contemporary life. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that song has been built into this habit of, let's grab the Indigenous person and put them up there. And for me, that takes away from the sovereignty of Indigenous song, and how song can be an access to the centrality of what our sovereignty looks like. And so it's not surprising that people haven't wanted to invest in that, to ensure that Indigenous song can have the full power of place in community. That is to create this wave of energy that you can plug into all kinds of different businesses, whether that's you know, clothing that we wear when we're on a stage that comes from some resources that come from your land, that actually came from an approach of caring for that landscape. in a way that honors thousands of years of culture. So for me, there's every single thing that we can do relating to our sovereignty as well when our balance of resourcing and access occurs in a way that is based on indigenous notions and methodologies of infrastructure development. So that does lead me to now move on to asking a question myself, and I'm really interested to hear all of you speak to this. And I think it's a really pertinent thing in the world at the moment that I think it's important for people to know about it. And it is this juggle, this dilemma for Indigenous people in terms of how do we move in the world today where there is this contemporary uh, industry that's been constructed, but at the same time we have roots of thousands of years that we want to be able to honor that, but it's obviously quite challenging in certain different environments. And I'd like to pass this over to Fawn firstly, after hearing you speak about growing up with your songs and now taking that in different directions as well. I'm really curious to hear about how you juggle being an Indigenous artist, but participating in a contemporary uh, world, so to speak, in different formats that are set up for so-called contemporary music. What are some of the challenges for you with that? But also, what are some of the solutions that you found that work for you?
I think because I was exposed to I come from a very musical family, and I grew up in a setting where we went to powwows and things like that. That was just a way of life for us. But I think some of the challenges on kind of keep sticking to my grassroots when it comes to music, but being able to try branch out and bridge and kind of and kind of infuse more contemporary music. I think there is a universal understanding that music is an expression we all share, and sometimes you can hear that through you can hear that in any music, and even like really traditional music. Sometimes I think it's just a lack of representation. I know we've had groups who've kind of pioneered, especially in the traditional music scene. We've had groups, even from our own territory here, such as Northern Cree, who've kind of made it onto these main stages, these worldly stages, such as the Grammys, or even like Young Spear, and they have been able to represent that music that has been resonating from our land for thousands of years. And for many people who finally got a glimpse of that, that was their very first time hearing things like that. As for myself, I guess my perspective on that is I come from two totally different mirroring like tribal beliefs, and to my best of my ability, I try my best to honor the cultural knowledge and the traditional teachings that come with sharing our music, while still trying to leave that door open for others to come in and enjoy it. And I think you hear that. I think all of us artists can relate to that when we say that our music evolves over time. When I first started, I was strictly just singing traditional style music, and it was pretty straightforward. It was just drumming and singing. But over time, as your music grows and we grow as artists, the music evolves. And just I think some of the solutions to staying true to myself as an Indigenous person, as a Nehio Squaw, as a Cree woman as well, is I think a lot of us come from a very unique perspective. Being Indigenous is just it's more than just music and language. For instance, is more than just something that we sing or that we speak or lyrics that we share. Having this perspective is more of what we say in my language is like a Nehio Mamta Nechiga, an indigenous way of thinking, an Indigenous worldview, because it's not just something that we that the stories that we tell, it's not just something that we put on and want to and want to just, it's not, it's something that we live. It comes from our perspective. It's our stories. And I think that's one thing we need to keep in mind, whether it doesn't matter what genre you stick to, whether you're traditional, whether you do country music or anything like that. We all come from a very unique perspective. Just being Indigenous is that perspective. It's kind of what drives the uniqueness of our sound and our music.
Absolutely love that. I feel the power in how you've been able to move forward with those strengths, the strength-based solution there. Um, Natani, I see you doing a lot of amazing work in many different walks of life on, you know, whether that's being directly on the front lines of uh, caring for the landscape and protecting the land, or whether that's doing your music in a large city center and so on and so forth, which a number of you in the group, I've seen that from you. I'm really curious for yourself, Natani, how you do juggle those various things, and what are your challenges, and what are some of the solutions that you found?
Yeah, no, it's very difficult to, Tone said it earlier. I talk about balance a lot, and I have an album called Balance. I have an album called Two Worlds, and it's because I do struggle with the identity of both worlds, and having to almost compromise my indigenous teachings and beliefs when I'm out in this other world, and having to um, almost go against what I was raised with. You know what I'm saying? It was very hard for me in the beginning because you're raised to be humble. You're raised to be um, very very understanding in where you are with the earth, and where you are in the world, and who you are in society, in the societies. And once you're out in this world doing music, it's almost the complete opposite of that. You have to you have to market yourself. You have to market your music. You have to brag yourself up. You have to be like, oh, and you have to be pushy. You have to kind of push a little bit to get to that front. To, oh, hey, like hey man, put me on stage. You know what I'm saying? And it's almost it was very hard for me to navigate that when I was younger. And you know um, these younger kids from the res, I understand their frustration, because there's one thing about releasing music online and releasing it on these platforms, but then there's another thing about when you go out and you want to do shows, you want to get your music out there. And that was a big thing for me because when I was younger in college, I was listening to these other rappers, like J. Cole was on the come up, Kendrick was on the come up. And, I grew up listening to Pac, I grew up listening to Bone Thugs. But I was really relating to these artists at that time in my life. And I was sitting there and I was like, man, how am I relating to these artists who aren't even native, yet they come from the East Coast or the West, but I'm sitting here just feeling every single word. And it's because they're human. We're all human. And so I sat there and I was like, all right, well, if they're making me relate to them, why can't I make people relate to us and see where we come from and life for us on the reservation? Because that's being human too. The trials, the tribulations, the suffering, the struggling, the dealings with suicide, death at a young age. You know what I'm saying? It's constant, and it's still very, very prevalent on reservations today. And that's why, Tone and All Season, they go in and they help these youth with recognizing their voice, and recognizing who they are, because sometimes it's just hard as a young native on the res to see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're just stuck in the darkness. And to see these people, artists like us, come in that have broken through in some sort of way to be on these stages, to have our videos hit 1 million views, to see us, have no fear going across the ocean and performing in front of people that can't even speak the same language as us. watching their faces light up and see that you make time for them is really it's worth it, because then they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they can begin to feel, I have a purpose. I have something to grab onto, and that's why we do. That's why I do what I do. I want these young kids to live. I really want them to live. I want me to live. I want you to live. And I want people to hear our stories, hear our pain, hear how much fun we have, hear our jokes. Feel everything we feel as Indigenous people. And yeah, we're rapping in English or whatever, or these colonizer languages, but shoot, man, I always said, if you're gonna make me speak your language, then I'm gonna use it against you. I'm gonna use it in a way that's gonna benefit me and my people. And that's kind of been like the balance I've been working throughout my career. I still work through. So as we continue to move forward, it's just gonna keep getting better and better. It's gonna keep continuing to open up these doors and bring up these young kids, that are really trying to do it, that have so much talent. Yep.
Thank you, brother. That was really powerful. Talking about the whole range of making people feel, really bringing that energy to the present, right there in front of people, to really feel the diversity of the Indigenous experience in the fullness of the way that we feel it. I love that so much. So a lot of nodding going on there, and I love that. It's a beautiful thing to just sit in this space with you all. Um, Xiutezcatl, you've been doing incredible work. I've seen your work for a long period of time. I've seen of you come out here, so-called Australia, with amazing work that you've done within environmental work, going back, I think, 2015 or thereabouts. First time I came across incredible things that you've been doing, and then I observed a short time after that you're doing music as well, and I actually played it on radio out here a number of times, and it's been a joy to watch you progress throughout your career, and to see that transition of doing those things that you were very notable for and still are, and now your music is really becoming quite formidable. I'm extremely interested to hear how that juggle process has been for you as well, and how you're still doing it, and the challenges and some of the solutions you're finding.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. I came to so-called Australia for the first time when I was 12, and it was, man, it was eye-opening and just so powerful. That's where I met my producer, my bro Jaya Surf, who has been on this very long musical journey with me ever since. And he was like 13. He was a couple years older than me, and I saw him. He was sitting there on Ableton making beats, and I was like, bro, what are you doing? He was like, yo, I'm making trap beats. And I'm like, show me, like, what do you like, tap me in. And so we were just kids then, but the record, we just put out a record together in December, that was kind of a bit of a reflection over the last almost 10 years of me and his friendship and our journey and our creative journey and expression. And it's been amazing to see how for sure, as you said, like, I entered the public sphere, so to speak, as an activist and as a spokesperson, and being invited into these spaces from the United Nations, to giving TED Talks, to all these different places. But the entire time, my heart was always in the music, and that's what I always loved to do more than anything. That feeling of performing, that feeling of being in front of a crowd and sharing through hip hop. I just love rap music and what I had seen it do for me in my life, and how I saw the OGs in my community in Denver and Boulder, and just like how they would talk to me about hip hop culture, not just as like a stagnant genre of music, but as this portal, as this doorway towards liberatory conversations and just transformational artistry was so inspiring to me. So it was always interesting, because I think as you gain a platform in a certain light, and the public starts to perceive you a certain way, then there's all those perceived notions of who you are projected upon you. And I think there's a very common, rhetoric or a common kind of thing that we see in our communities where our stories are oftentimes being told for us by other people, by outsiders, by non-native people, by white folks, kind of imposing their idea of who we are as native people or as artists or as activists or whatever. And I for sure like was a little kid when I started doing all this stuff. So I slowly started to gain that awareness. And the more that I leaned into my music, I was like, yo, this is how I get to like fully be in my power and fully say what I need to say without the guise of a lot of these like white climate and environmental organizations and institutions, trying to paint me a certain way. I was like, I get to show up how I want to show up through my art. And I get to explore and learn and understand who I am better through my art. And music was challenged me in a way that like public speaking and stuff didn't, because I from a young age I had I was speaking publicly and using my voice and got really good at that. But when you're making music, you can't just get up there and I don't know. It took a lot of refining, and I'm still doing it, right? To make incredible music. That's that's the foundation. Even if you have a message, if you have a powerful story, if you have a unique background, all that's great. But if the art isn't on point, it's gonna fall short of its potential. So I always had this beautiful kind of relationship with the art too, where like it was really challenging me to push myself to put in the hours, put in those 10,000 hours to write and write and write and learn and learn and learn and listen and listen and listen, and balance those things out. So yeah, I mean that, and now I'm in a place in my life where I'm very blessed and grateful to be putting the majority of my effort and energy into my art, into my music. And it's not because I don't care about the movement anymore. It's like that work is baked into everything we do because of who we are, and because of that integrity that I know many of us like lead with in our artistry. And it's like, tap into these movements, tap into the work in a way that makes you feel alive. For me, that's my music. For somebody else, it may be poetry or journalism or a different form of storytelling. But it's like that's how I think we will continue to push forward in these movements for liberation, is doing the work from a place of love and passion, not just because this is the cookie cutter box of what they tell us activism is supposed to look like. And this, and oftentimes from a white perspective, from how white people want to experience and see, natives stand on a stage and, play that role. But it's like, no, reclaim that space. And I think art has helped me do that. And I've been really inspired to see other artists kind of step into that same power.
That's powerful, brother. Real powerful, real powerful. To just really feel that consolidation of who you are and choosing the way that you want to present that to whoever it might be. That's such a powerful takeaway right there. Phoenix, I'm really feeling that you're resonating with a lot that's been said throughout this particular question. So I'm going to pass it over to you now to ask you how you juggle this complex experience of creating music in the now as an Indigenous person, and some of your challenges and some of the solutions that you've been finding.
Firstly, I want to say thank you, everyone, for speaking your piece and your truth. It's like really inspirational and like has definitely evoked a lot of emotion and inspiration in myself. So, thank you. And I just I feel like my intention as a creative has always been like since I was younger, like even though I didn't know what my calling was, you know, I just knew I wanted to create something. I knew that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to bring something into this world. And I felt inside of myself, I always felt like that was something I needed to do. Like it's a necessity. So, doing that and staying true to that intention of, just like letting my soul speak and letting it come through. And I feel like that's restorative for me. Like coming back to ceremony, like I didn't have access to that as a inner city native, all the time. I didn't always have those resources, and that was the challenge actually, growing up for me. And knowing that I was native, knowing that I you know that I yearned for this connection, you know. Um, and I felt like through music that was what I had. That was through creation, that was what I had. That was my way of you know, um, building a relationship with myself and with creator and with my community. And later on, I felt as if that was like, it became, the message became a little easier to understand. Like I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing this for. Like I want to really create a safe space for myself and my community. And I feel like, you know, I just um I felt like resisting colonial agendas by taking up space as a two-spirit person, and like as a member of my community, I wanted more than ever to especially create a safe space for women and two-spirit, um, indigenous people, black and brown people. That's what I want, you know. And it's really hard to um, do in this industry. And it's like we're constantly fighting that agenda, like that we have to have this, you know, we have to be famous, and we have to do things a certain way, like we have to be palatable for white folks. And it's like that's not that's not my intention. Feel like I'm always going to be, as long as I'm staying true to the core of like why I want to do this, and coming back to that, like this is why I'm doing this. You know, that's what keeps me grounded and keeps me, you know, staying true to myself, and like, you know, not getting lost. Because I feel like, you know, there's so many tantalizing things in this music industry, right? Like fame, and like I don't, it's not um it's not something I've felt comfortable, you know, getting into. That's why I haven't really released a lot of music. I do more live shows than anything. But I love producing so much. I'm just very protective of it, and it's like there's a reason for that, you know, cuz sometimes this music medicine is just for me right now. And that sometimes, like, you know, as someone who struggled with like, you know, depression and like suicidal ideation and like all these things, these inner battles with myself, I feel like, you know, there's that this gift of creation has helped me battle that, but also helped me talk about that, not just, you know, with words, but sonically, like, you know. um and I felt like just being in ceremony, I felt that same thing, like, you know, just the beat of a drum, you know, our voices coming together, connecting, you know, like in Temascal, we're all just in the dark, you know, being embraced by creator and our ancestors and each other and ourselves. And that's the connection I felt with, you know, that's how that was what I felt when I started making music, you know. As a kid, I was like, I feel embraced, and this is what keeps me on this path, you know, just reminding myself like, hey, this connection is everything. And that's how we fight back, you know, that's how we resist. And that connection is like it literally is all I live for. Music is what I live for. And um so yeah, I'm protective of it, and like I just want to create a safe space with it. And yeah, I just want it to be a restorative thing for us as we evolve, you know, because our world is always evolving, like, and it's important to always come back to our roots and our traditions. And like um yeah, just that's important. So I feel that that's how I battle that. um yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. Thank you. You touched on some really powerful things there in terms of the medicine that is indigenous music, the medicine in terms of just being medicine for medicine's sake, and that the whole notions around contemporary music that is often around release, so-called, you know, this, that, and the other, around the packaging of who these expectations are of us to not feel inclined to just go with that is such a powerful message. And that's something on a personal level I think about a lot. I didn't release music for a very long time, partly because I felt that that wasn't necessarily what I was supposed to do. Like that I had to make music first and foremost in terms of for the connection of what it means to be who I am as an Indigenous person. And then maybe if it ever felt right, that I would release music, and I seem to have done that. So thank you. It's I know it's a really important conversation that a lot of Indigenous people are having as well. And again, it's not necessarily a conversation that everybody gets to hear about. So thank you so much for that, Phoenix. That was really beautiful and powerful to hear from you in regards to that and your story. Antoine, if you're still here with us, I believe we may have lost Antoine just for a moment. So I'm actually going to go back across to Liam. And Liam, I know that you live in the city of so-called Chicago. It's a big metropolis. It's one of the biggest in out there in Turtle Island as a whole. It's one of the biggest music cities in the whole world, in a sense, in terms of Western music. What have been some of the challenges for you there, living away from your own community and forging this pathway for yourself within music? And what are some of the positive solutions that you've been finding through your pathways?
Yeah, totally. So kind of like Xiutezcatl said, like when you're in LA or Chicago, New York City, those are three major music markets within the country. So I mean, there's a lot that I was exposed to in just moving here. But I guess for me, there is a connection between kind of what Phoenix was talking about as far as music just bringing people together, and kind of, you know, being separated from a lot of my family growing up. And I didn't really know a lot of my dad's family. Music to me was always a way that, you know, I found community. And even outside of the Native community, growing up in Minneapolis, I was blessed that there was, you know, a very thriving kind of underground punk scene, and also a lot of independent hip hop too. So growing up in the city, I don't know if people know a lot of the rhyme sayers, hip hop artists, Atmosphere, Brother Ali, but a lot of that kind of popped off right at my formative kind of musical years. And so in a sense, I felt very blessed in music to be able to connect in that way, and learn about spirituality too, and growing up there. Just from a lot of the activism history that exists in Minneapolis. And I kind of ended up in Chicago. And I think if I hadn't developed as an Indigenous person and connected to my spirituality, I don't think I would have been able to correctly make that transition. And I just kind of ended up here by some life circumstances that I kind of had to roll with. And it ended up just connecting me to a lot of people and a lot of industry people, and just a lot of the right moves that needed to happen. But it really was, I think in hindsight, when I look back on it, it was definitely a very spiritual, formative kind of time in my life, that I was just really trusting that the music held the power in my life, you know. And I think that's always been kind of a running vein, I think, for a lot of Indigenous artists, not just myself, but that there is a power behind the work that we're doing. And even when we kind of forget about it, you know, our ancestors and our people are always pushing us the right direction. And I guess I'm always kind of conflicted. And I think this is why it's an interesting conversation between kind of contemporary representation and, you know, music as my medicine. And, you know, you can put me in a room and I'm going to be the happiest person just playing my music for no people, just playing guitar. But at the other sense, I also remember when I was a kid and we saw Black Eyed Peas on music video on TV when we were really little. And it was like taboo, never needed to say he was Native. He never needed to put that out there. But as Native kids, you see that, and that kind of changes your whole entire perceptional reality of how I looked at the world. You know, like I'd never seen a Native person succeeding on that level of the music industry. So I guess I kind of live in a dichotomy a little bit, or a little bit of a duality with that, where I understand that there's personal, you know, protected energy that we need to maintain in our own medicine and our own magic within us as artists individually, and how we work with each other. But I also do believe in our artists succeeding, so that our youth, like off of what Natani was saying, that, you know, the young people need to see this power. They need to have that voice. They need to be able to see the artists up on the stage and be able to visualize that. And so I think for me, it's definitely a balance of taking steps forward as pushing things forward for the community and working with representation, and still also remembering of where those songs come from, and where a lot of people, whether they're native or they're not native, understand that we don't really know where these songs come from. We don't know what you can define the sources, I guess, of songs, or some of the greatest songs that have ever been written. Where did that song come from? Sometimes it comes out of a dream. Sometimes it comes from heartbreak or just a random, series of events. And so I think, to me, it's a duality of both of those things in a lot of ways, of constantly maintaining and grounding yourself and remembering who you are, because that's where your power comes from. And also remembering kind of what Natani says, that you're representative of your community, and young people are, whether you want to be represented in that way or not, are looking at you for guidance, and they really need people to turn around. And I kind of agree with a lot of things that have been said tonight, but I think it is important to turn around. I think it's important to shine and to let yourself shine. If you start to go down that path of fame. And I guess that kind of leads me to my next question for Anton. I don't know if we got him in the room yet, but it's more about the mainstream industry. And I think your music has really, along with Xiutezcat's music too, has really crossed that bridge between involving traditional music and also being very mainstream song structure. So I guess the question is, do you feel as though the industry as itself, as kind of more of mainstream artists that are Indigenous, do you think that the mainstream industry is doing enough to support kind of your career? Are they accepting, or is it kind of like a struggle, I guess, to balance those two things?
I would say, I don't know. As far as the they're accepting when they hear it, so I'm not sure how it goes for other artists, but I know when my music gets heard, even in Omaha, people are always finding out about, oh, he's from Omaha, that's what's up. They just like the music, and they're sitting there singing, hey, Naoa, singing like traditional vocals, and they don't know that it's native. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, what do you say right there? I can't figure out what you said. So people like the music. And like I said before, as far as mainstream, crossing over to mainstream, once we get that access, people are going to love it. It's something that you can't, like as native artists, like we've been saying all night, being ourselves is that unique new sound that people are always trying to search for. And that's just us being ourselves. So as far as being in the mainstream and, how do they accept it? Are they supporting us? I don't think they even realize that, how big native artists can be. I don't think they realize how many native artists there are. And when I talk about stuff, when I say that, we're getting back to what I said in the beginning, I kind of jumped into it. But when I say access, it's like, okay, when you give access to me, you give access to him, to her, to them. And that's how it goes. A lot of people don't even know that there's a res an hour above Omaha. The Omaha people that the city is named after. And then we have the Ho-Chunk reservation, Winnebago, that came down here from their homelands, and they're 8 miles from Macy. So it's 2 reservations right next to each other. And then we have reservations all the way around. And that goes for every city. People don't realize how close they are to Native people. And of course, they don't know whose land they're on. They say, oh yeah, Native land. But whose land specifically? What territory are we in? You know what I mean? And even like saying our land, it's like we respect the land as we don't own the land. We just, are here appreciating the land and everything that she has to offer. So, as Native talk like elders, when we talk, we go all the way around to get to our always jumping into different topics. But we just have to hit them with it, man. We have to hit them with, we're here. And that's my goal, is to push my music as far as I can. And as I push my music, I bring all season artists. And our goal, I say, look, if you're running with all season, you're going to push Native artists, and you're going to do that for other people. And we're going to keep doing this. And one of us is going to hit and go super mainstream. And then we're all going to come up, and then there's going to be a huge wave of Native artists. And they will be accepting of it because it's good music. It's good music. It's healing. And aside from the message that we bring, which we bring a really powerful message, it's just a good vibe. As far as resources, those are being created by ourselves. I think once they get a good taste of Native artists, resources will grow, of course. We're in a time right now where, people who don't usually get support are getting a lot of support, and that's a beautiful thing too. But yeah, man, I guess the message what we're trying to do right now, I can't speak on, what it is, because I haven't reached that level yet. The goal is to reach that level, to cross over, to get mainstream audiences, mainstream attention. Because right now we don't have mainstream attention. We don't have that representation to speak on certain things. Like, I tell young artists all the time, they get kind of discouraged when they see somebody else winning. I've seen this young artist come up who's jealous of this young Native artist, and they're just trying to get there first. And I'm like, look, man, like, if you look in other communities, they don't, the Mexican community, they don't get mad if somebody succeeds, because they're used to seeing them succeed, themselves succeed, within movies, with film, music, everything. So with us, we don't really have that. So it's kind of hard to break that mindset, but it's what we're trying to do. That's what I try to push onto young artists, is that, if this person wins, that means that you win. It's not who gets there first. It's just getting there in general. We speak on missing, murdered Indigenous women. We speak on what they do to our land, with the lack of resources within Native communities on the res and within the city. But we kind of speak to ourselves sometimes. It'll be nice once we get that mainstream attention through music, through Reservation Dogs is doing really good on breaking down those walls and those doors. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to break down. But when the idea of going mainstream, for me, it doesn't just say, okay, I'm going to get clout and attention and money. It means all of these different things that will be able to bring light to everybody, and all of our issues that need help, and just everything in general. So I guess we'll see once we cross that bridge on how accepting the world truly is, which I believe they will be accepting, and they'll love it. The music is good, the message is good, and how could you not love some Native artists killing it? Yeah. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the interesting things in talking with Neil was that in Australia there actually is a lot of these label representation happening as far as Indigenous artists. So I think you're completely right that it's not happened quite on Turtle Island yet for widespread success contemporary music wise. But I think if you look into the future, and if you look in other countries that have had it happen, I think it's like really close on the horizon. And so I think these are really important discussions, I think, for people to talk about as artists and with their communities. And I kind of wanted to ask you, Xiutezcatl, what your experience has been in LA. We've seen some commercial work and some different activism work that you've done, and how have you really been received or dealt with the mainstream music industry that you've interacted with? I know you touched on a little bit earlier.
Sure. Yeah, it's crazy. It's really it's intense. I mean, there's so much like I'm the kind of person that gets I get really obsessed with like learning and understanding. Okay, what is publishing? Like, what does a publishing deal mean? What does it mean to have somebody out there collecting my publishing royalties on my behalf? And looking at distribution. Like I like to try to understand these things. being an independent artist. So on top of being, indigenous artists, we're also, I think, for the most part, all independent, all pushing our own stuff. So even, regardless of background, like being an independent artist in its own is really difficult because you don't have these massive corporations that are pushing and pulling in each other's pockets, putting their favorite artists, in the playlist. So there's definitely a lot that I've, interacted with out here and meeting a lot of people and just like listening, doing my best to listen. And I have the privilege of having some really great mentors that have been in these spaces in the past, that have, managed big artists in the past, that have, done the thing very conventionally. And a lot of what I'm learning is even people who have had that kind of success understand and recognize that the industry doesn't work for artists. Artists are not, like, our best interest is not in the front of mind of people that work at these labels or people that work at these distribution platforms. They don't really care about artists. They care about the bottom line. And so in a lot of ways, learning the music industry is so that you can navigate it. So you can navigate the mainstream, you can understand all these different things. And then eventually, whether it's through projects like what Antoine is doing or different folks, like, you can then go and build the alternative. But you can't build something that is an alternative to the existing system if you don't understand the system, if you don't kind of know the ins and outs. So I've really enjoyed learning these things and kind of brushing up with, and seeing different people have that kind of success. And it's varied. There's actually not one formula of how it works or how people pop off. Like there's so many different layers to it. And I think at the end of the day, if like artists stay really committed in just like integral to what you do and to who you are and to what you have to say, that's the most valuable thing that can't be replicated or bought or, spammed with a certain algorithm to go viral. Like, and I talked to my boy Mato about this a lot too, because we have, our managers pushing like, yo, bro, you gotta get on TikTok, you gotta be like, hopping on these trends and shit. And he said it to me, he's like, yo, bro, I'm not here to go viral. I'm here to make everlasting impacts with my art, and not to say that TikTok's, doesn't have a place or isn't a tool that we can be grounded in what it is that you have to do that is beyond just fitting into the box of the mainstream or of the music industry, while understanding it and learning it well. That's been some of my experience, and it's been eye-opening. And I encourage, and that's just one thing I was going to say to the first question too, like folks that are watching this live stream, other young kids, like not everybody's a rapper, not everybody's a singer or a performer, and that's okay. But we need a whole generation of young people, not just to be performing and to be like the faces of the whatever next wave of native music, but we need people to like be starting the labels and opening distribution companies and looking at like PR, marketing, and like there are so many different elements to what it means to service an artist's journey. And Indigenous people are gonna do it different, period. When we step into these spaces, we will do it different. And we're not gonna replicate these same extractive models because we know better, and we've gone through it. So I think that's a beautiful thing too, encouraging folks that are listening and tapping in that are curious, with or without business degrees, with or without experience in the music industry. Like, we need y'all. We need a whole young generation of people coming up and helping elevate this whole movement, because it's not just artists. Sometimes you just see the artists or the headlining tour or the record that gets all these streams, and you don't see the work that went behind it. It's a whole team of people. And I think we understand that well. Like, we are not self-made. I love this, how people talk about this. We are very community-made as artists, as Indigenous people. So I think, encouraging more of the community to rise up and be a part of this beautiful expansion of our art, of our voices, and have it not just be about the individual or my record or my track or whatever. And it's like, how does what we do elevate as many people as possible around us? Through the music video to hair and makeup, there's so many layers to it. So how do we have these positive ripple effects through how we tap in with the industry? And that's what I'm really interested in continuing to see.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I mean, I think not a lot of people can touch on those experiences, and I think we've all learned a lot from each other in this discussion. We're unfortunately kind of at the 90-minute marker. So I want to take a moment to thank Indigenous Peoples Movement for helping promote this event, and Lakota People Law Project for kind of running the tech behind it. I want to thank you, Natani, for coming on, and Neil, and Phoenix, Fawn, Anton, and Xiutezcatl. Thanks, everybody. I think this was a conversation that we can continue on to the future. And it's really inspiring to me to kind of hear so many of these ideas that we've been bouncing around that people in different camps are all kind of working on this. And I think that's really what our goal is for opening up Indigenous Peoples Movement as a music platform to continue creating kind of digital avenues that we can support all these programs and support kind of international approach to these subjects. So I want to thank you all for coming on. Niawa, thank you.